Okay, so want to answer a question we get all the time is like, what's the key differences between a plain text email and an HTML email? Like, an email is an email, right? Not necessarily. So again, thinking about these in terms of like what's what. A plain text email typically, again, thinking an email that you send as a person. So typically, if I'm sending an email to a person through like a Gmail, that's going to come through as a plain text email. You can't really do a ton of things to, again, adjust the formatting of that. Like it may have a signature. You can include an image every once in a while if it's typically a personal email. But as a business, you're going to the structure of what's allowed in those plain text emails is going to be pretty narrow. So you can't use as many different, like again, like different exciting components, but you can add hyperlinks, you can add text, and typically this email does perform well and people really enjoy them because it feels a little bit more human, a little bit more personable, and when it's done well, that humanity really shines through and really differentiates these, makes them a lot better, and in a lot of cases helps to develop that relationship with the brand a lot faster. The HTML email is going to be a little bit different in terms of like, again, having a few more visual components you can incorporate, images, GIFs, lots of different things, moving, a little bit of moving text, and even some dynamic components of like an AMP email is going to be very, very different than a plain text email. Okay, so how do HTML and plain text emails stack up in terms of deliverability? So there's going to be a few components that play into this. So if you're both are going to be kind of delivered in the same way, some may be again, some may be picked up differently or may display differently on different service providers. And also, typically, if you may kind of like add too much to the email, too many HTML components can flag a spam filter. But there's also kind of the caveat of yes, if you use too spammy of language, when Gmail or like Yahoo email service provider is scanning that email, if you're using too spammy of language, like like free house in Boca Raton or whatever, like fine free money, yeah, like anything that could be viewed as a spammy email, or that triggers a spam filter, is also going to be again flagged as spam. Or both of these are really going to kind of come back tie back into your sender reputation as a sender. So both of these are also going to tie back into how well are your emails performing, how well is your audience finding value in those emails, are they opening and clicking those emails, are they responding to those emails, what trust indicators are you giving in terms of you are a reputable sender, you are not trying to again lure people into some shady pyramid scheme, but you are an individual, you are a business that people do want to be communicating with and finding value in. So that's going to be the difference between the high level difference between those two. Um, Again, you can find a little bit of both. Sometimes, again, have had some luck with plain text emails going into the Gmail inbox and kind of getting to the inbox sooner than, again, going to the promotions, newsletters, and then inbox tabs. So sometimes it's kind of a hack to use a plain text email to get into the inbox a little bit faster. Again, that's going to be viewable, it's going to be readable, and again, be able to hopefully get into that a little bit quicker. So using both a little bit of both of those in conjunction can typically hope to help in that warming process and expedite it. But typically, even in the HTML emails, you'll want to make sure you use some live text to make sure those can be readable. Only having only HTML components or only images isn't always the best strategy there because um, again, people could hide what's there, and again, it's not as transparent as like a Gmail or a Yahoo or insert email provider wants it to be. Okay, so when thinking about how your audience is going to see these, how are they going to view it on what device? Thinking about this, like so much of email is moving towards a more mobile first design and layout because so much of that audience is opening on mobile. If you're a B2B business, you may have more desktop openers, but typically most businesses have that open rate being higher on mobile. So thinking of optimizing for that mobile user is typically kind of the default at this point. So what's going to work on mobile is also going to work on desktop. So that plain text is going to, again, be deliverable and readable there. So planning for, again, knowing your mobile user, that live text is going to be really smooth and really seamless. Sometimes this is where HTML emails can fall flat, where they may not be as readable there because, again, you have that text overlaid on an image block that may be a little bit smaller when it's compressed in the mobile or on a different device. Or again, so somebody out there has that like itty bitty iPhone 6. It's just like a peanut and trying to read it. So it may not necessarily be as easily readable on mobile all the time if you're doing that HTML. So if you're doing HTML, making sure to again keep that image size large enough, test it a few times, making sure it's going to be ADA compliant, just so it's again high enough contrast and readable on mobile device is super important. Again, it's not as difficult on the plain text side, so that's where again that having live text possibly in HTML or just go with the plain text. So I kind of comparing both. If we come down to like which one would you use? So when comparing HTML, which one are you going to use? Like HTML and plain text emails, which ones to go with? This is where, because every brand is going to be different, understanding what's going to work for yours. Like basically finding that right cadence, that right sweet spot of how many HTML emails versus how many plain text emails. If I can implement plain text emails easier than HTML emails, that may be my goal. Basically, once you can find out what's going to work with your audience, that's when you can start leaning in on doing more of each. And the more time you spend doing it, the more you're going to improve and have an understanding of, hey, this works, this doesn't. Like, why don't I send, like, if I send a plain text email to an audience like in the morning, maybe like in the morning, at early part of the week, maybe a HTML email later in the week in the evening. Or if I know my audience is going to be on mobile different times of the week when I'm reaching them on desktop, during the business day. All of those things are factors that play a role when you're deciding on how to use and what to use. And also some of it's just going to be the application of actually doing it. So like, again, if it's hard to design a bunch of those HTML emails, that's a heavy investment. Not everybody can do that. So again, that's where some of those plain text can save your life. And having a good template that you can leverage to do that on a consistent basis is going to make that easier, just to do a lot more work a lot faster. Okay, so one last thing. We talked about plain text, we talked about like HTML emails. The last one that I think is kind of relevant, and again, it's a little bit different, but again, kind of a hybrid of both. So it's basically an HTML email that you make look like a plain text email. Basically, that live active text is going to be really easy to use, and it's going to be, again, that easy readability on mobile, on desktop, live text, mobile or desktop, also going to be viewable on dark mode, so really seamless, really streamlined. But what really makes it great here is because you can incorporate all of those like nuts and bolts that you really love from the HTML emails into this. So like making it look like a plain text email, active live text, possibly some links. You can incorporate some buttons, some active some like a product feed. This is where these really shine too, because again, that high level of deliverability in terms of like humanity and custom feel, but also all of the usability you really want with an HTML email. Um, Typically, when we're actually doing this, as we kind of compare nuts and bolts of having like one one kind of hybrid email in the automation sequence, and a version, like one version being a hybrid, one version being a plain text, um, typically that hybrid version is actually going to perform better in terms of the click-through rate. So again, it's a little bit easier to make a really direct call to action, but that hybrid email performs at a really high rate. So again, kind of having a few different layers to that email where you can incorporate the components you really want to add, like the items in someone's cart, or the products they viewed, or again something a little bit more visual but still have that same personal human feel. That's where kind of that we can find that sweet spot, and we've had some success doing that.